talking about your marker word, which is also known as a bridge or a click. So if you've ever done clicker training, this is going to be the exact same thing, except we're going to use a word to mark our dog's behavior. And I'll also have a follow-up video showing you this. So this is just sort of like some theory, and then I'll show you a little bit more of what it looks like. But your marker word is marking a moment in time to highlight your dog's behavior to them. So we're going to use the word yes. So a good example, you tell your dog sit. The second their butt hits the ground, you say yes. You've now marked this behavior for your dog, so your dog understands that something about my butt hitting the ground made my person say yes, and then I got this reward. Now you want to reward your dog within 2 to 3 seconds of saying your marker word so that they make the connection that yes equals, oh, I did something that made me get a reward. So it's a way to communicate to your dog that what they did in a single second of time is something we want them to do more of. So we're always going to use food in the beginning. Eventually you can change that, but right now we're always going to use food. And so a really big thing is that you need to have good timing, because let's say your dog's butt hits the ground, but you were too late and your dog started standing up and you said yes as they were standing up. Your dog's not going to know what sit means then. They're going to think that something about moving around is what earned them their reward. So your timing needs to be super accurate, and it's okay if it's not in the beginning. It won't be in the beginning, and that's very normal. Nobody's perfect in the beginning at anything they do. So it just takes practice, and sit's a good one to practice with because, unless, you can't really mess it up and we can always fix it later. So that's a good one to kind of practice with. But the other thing you want to be really careful of, in addition to your timing, is that you're not overshadowing. So I'll show both these things in the video, but overshadowing means that when you mark yes, you're moving your hand into your treat pouch, or you're like moving around. So let's say you say yes and as your dog's butt hits the ground, but as you were saying yes, you moved your hand into your treat pouch. Your dog is not going to understand that them sitting earned the reward. They're going to think that you moving your hand into the treat pouch is what you were marking. So you want to make it very clear to your dog that your marker word has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them and how they behave. So I'll show you what that looks like for some clarity, but be careful to be very still when you say your marker word. So 6 things to mark and reward. This will be spontaneous things your dog does that you like. So let's say they just go walk over and lay down in their bed. You'd say yes and toss them some food in their bed. Any improvement, so let's say they're jumping on somebody at the door and then they take a breather or sniff the ground instead. That is an improvement from jumping, so you'd say yes and you'd toss them some food. Compliance, so you ask the dog to sit and it sits. You say yes and give them a reward. Relaxation, this is going to be a really big one we'll get into, but anytime your dog shows behavior that's more relaxed than before. So going back to that jumping behavior example, your dog's jumping and then instead of jumping they sniff the floor or they walk away for a second. You'd mark that and toss them some food. Recall, so if you call your dog and they look and run over to you, you'd say yes, and then you'd give them a big string of food to kind of keep them with you. And then anytime you correct your dog, so if you say, hey, knock it off, you'd say yes and toss them food the second that they change their behavior as a result of your correction. Or let's say they hit the end of the leash, that would be a correction. The second they yield to the leash, you'd say yes and reward them. So we're going to try and really not use a whole lot of corrections with our dogs, but anytime you end up using one, you always want to pair it with food so that it helps your dog kind of stay in an appetitive state. So charging your marker word, this is really based a whole lot on classically conditioning. So as you do the 6 things to mark and reward throughout the week before we meet, your dog will start to understand that, oh, this word yes is amazing, and every time I hear it, I get food. And the other thing that's really cool about it is that I can start to earn a paycheck basically based on what I do. So we want our dogs to understand 2 things. We want them to understand that yes means that something they did is going to get them a reward. We want them to understand that yes means they're getting a reward. So we always want yes to be tied to their behavior and have that understanding with them. And they learn this very quickly. So just to kind of summarize a little bit, so classically conditioning, you might have heard of the Russian scientist Ivan Pavlov. He did experiments with dogs where he You can see here it's like just giving them the food makes the dog salivate. When he hears the bell, the dog doesn't salivate. He just doesn't really care, right? The bell has no significance. But when you have the bell and then food, the dog salivates. So that eventually, if you practice this conditioning enough, they hear the bell and they salivate because they're expecting food, right? So that's what we want our marker word to do. We want them to hear their word and be like, oh, that's my favorite word. I'm going to get food. How cool is that? So we really want them to be charged on that word. So that's what that means. So a good test to see if your dog is having a good charge on their marker word is after you've practiced for a couple days, if you say yes, do they perk up and look at you? That's a really good sign that you've gotten a good charge on your marker word. Okay, and so shaping behavior. So I'm going to go into this in the next video so that I don't overwhelm you with too many things. And I'll go back to showing you the video on how to mark and reward your dog without overshadowing.